Hello and welcome again to another edition of Lost in Science across Australia on the Community Radio Network. My name is Stu, and on this week's show I'm going to be talking a little bit about proof. What does proof mean? What does proof mean in science? Well, not a great deal, as it turns out.
Really?
Well, not really. We don't use the word proof much in science.
I mean, we use evidence, don't we?
Yeah, exactly.
People who are non-scientific use proof a lot, like, scientifically proven to reduce wrinkles. You see that a lot.
And I'm going to talk about why you shouldn't say that and why it's not actually how things work in science. Claire, what have you got for us this week?
Well, this week I have a story about probably a bit of a maligned bird. I like the maligned birds, the maligned Australian birds, the brush turkey or the scrub turkey. Or
Who maligns the scrub turkey?
I think a lot of people. I think a lot of people with quite nice backyards with a lot of mulch, especially around the Queensland and New South Wales area. Scrub turkey gets in the backyard and just starts mounding that mulch. And they get maligned for it. Anyway, new research has just come out showing that a relative of the scrub turkey or the brush turkey.
Or the dirt hen.
No,
I just made that up. It's not the dirt hen.
Fossilised remains of 5 relatives, actually, of the scrub turkey have been found, and one of them is the size of a kangaroo. So we're going to be talking about what that means. Chris, how about you?
Well, I'm good, thank you, Claire. Well, I have a story that is also a bit like Stu's, kind of looking at conceptual sort of things about science, but now bring it down to the practical. Because, we talked, I think, recently about how science, you get changes a lot in science and this sort of thing. I mean, often though science doesn't completely turn things around, like, Einstein built on Newton. He didn't completely,
overturn it.
Was, wrong entirely. But sometimes it does turn around completely. And one good example of that is peanut allergies. So where the advice essentially has gone a full circle from what people used to recommend. I'm going to look at what the latest evidence says and why the evidence changed completely.
So we've probably all heard of Senator Malcolm Roberts in the Australian Federal Parliament. So he's a Queenslander who's affiliated with the One Nation Party. Well, he's made a big deal since taking office of challenging various government bodies to produce evidence for him. That is what some government bodies are set up to do, really, is to produce evidence of certain aspects of the world so that we can understand them better and make decisions and make policy about things that happen in the world. But he has had a go specifically at the CSIRO, amongst others. I mean, he's had a go at the Bureau of Meteorology, who are probably the most
apolitical,
non-challenging, apartisan sort of groups that exist in, basically they measure the weather and tell us what the weather's going to be like, hopefully, in the future. But Senator Roberts recently tabled a report called On Climate, CSIRO Lacks Empirical Proof. And he subtitled it, We Have a Choice, The Tyranny of Controlling Opinions versus the Freedom of Objective Scientific Evidence.
Wow.
So, look, just this title alone, he's made some huge, huge mistakes, which draw into question his ability to question the science or the policies around science of not only climate change, but science in general. So, first of all, his use of the word proof. What does proof mean?
Well, in alcohol, the proof is like how much percentage, but it's sort of like it's 100 proof is like 50%, I think, alcohol.
Yeah, 80 proof is 40% alcohol. So, yeah, there is that use of the word proof. In mathematics,
Oh, yes. You can prove things in mathematics logically.
That is true. A proof is an argument that supports a mathematical statement. It's a way of demonstrating how something works in maths by inductive reasoning.
Yes.
In logic, which is closely related to maths, A proof is an argument that demonstrates inductive reasoning to demonstrate a logical rule. Both of these, they use inductive reasoning to arrive at a conclusion that is self-evident. So it's based on things which you can just look at and go, well, that's true. That's what proof is in logic and in mathematics. And in common use, people use it to mean the same as evidence. So, you would say in a court case, say that you wanted proof that somebody did something or that somebody was in a certain location. But even in court, they generally use the word evidence rather than proof because it's such a problematic word.
What about the phrase prove beyond reasonable doubt?
Well, see, that is an example where in court that they would use the word prove. And what they mean there is demonstrate.
Yeah.
They show beyond reasonable doubt that something happened. In science, it doesn't mean any of those things. In science, to prove something means something else entirely. If you're proving something in science, it's going to be a hypothesis. And it's an old-fashioned version of the word prove, which is based on the Latin word provare, which means to test. So you're proving it by testing it. We still actually use this word in English. So you have things like proving grounds for a car is where you test a new car model, for example. Proofreading of a document.
Oh, yes.
Sure.
You're testing how well the document's written
yeah, that's fair.
by reading through it. And even proving loaves of bread. So if you're making bread, you prove a loaf of bread by seeing if you're testing if the yeast worked or not. If the bread rises, the yeast works. You can bake the bread. If it,
is that what it means in that?
That's where it comes from.
respect?
Yeah, it's from the original
We've learned something today.
Latin.
Surprise.
Surprised.
So in science, proof is testing. You prove something, you're testing it. You're testing a hypothesis. But mostly we just say test or experiment in a lot of cases. It's the evidence produced by the test that either supports or does not support the hypothesis. So the hypothesis on the effect of carbon dioxide levels on the climate was first proposed quite some time ago. Any guesses how long ago?
It was like 1870s or thereabouts, wasn't it?
Well, the first proposal or the first hypothesis that it was that carbon dioxide levels would affect the climate, carbon dioxide levels from burning fossil fuels.
50s?
Specifically 1896.
Oh, 1896.
Yeah.
Oh,
So the Industrial Revolution was in full swing by then.
yeah.
That was Svante Arrhenius or something like that,
That was
wasn't it?
Svante Arrhenius, who's a Swedish researcher.
So I should have pushed my buzzer before I said that.
You should have. You would have got the pick of the board.
Yeah.
Since 1896, that's been extensively tested by numerous studies all around the world, and they've all concluded that yes, increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will cause temperatures to rise.
Yeah.
So there's no question that there's evidence, there's mountains of evidence that this is actually a tested hypothesis which has been proven to be upheld pretty much every time anyone's ever bothered to test it. So the evidence is there, and the proof is not something that a scientist would ask for. That's not what scientists ask for. They ask for evidence that supports a hypothesis. They don't ask for proof because it doesn't really mean anything in science. Now, the second mistake he makes in the title of his report is in the suggestion that the opinions of scientists is somehow controlling what he calls objective scientific evidence. So I'll just recall that he said, we have a choice, the tyranny of controlling opinions versus the freedom of objective scientific evidence. What he's suggesting is that there's a bunch of scientists who've all got together and decided, no, we're going to shut down all of this objective scientific evidence that someone else is producing.
Aren't scientists delivering the freedom of objective facts?
Well, exactly. What he's done is he's taken the idea of scientific consensus and assumed that means the opinions of scientists. But that's not what it means. Scientific consensus is not a group of scientists agreeing with each other and seeking to stamp out all opposition to their established viewpoint. Scientific consensus is when a large number of published peer-reviewed research papers come to the same conclusion. That's what consensus is. And this is what's happened with climate science over decades and decades of work all over the world by all these different scientists. the fact that the scientists' opinions then reflect the evidence of the work that's been published all around the world is a byproduct of the scientific consensus. It's not what makes the scientific consensus.
Yeah, this is why you can't really go too far down this path before going into some sort of massive conspiracy theory, because the scientists would have to all be in on it together, deliberately faking for this evidence to be wrong.
Exactly. And I mean, the thing is, one of the reasons science works so well is that scientists are really, really fast to point out each other's mistakes. They love it. There's nothing they love better than poking holes in someone else's work.
You don't win the Nobel Prize for agreeing with everyone who came before you.
That is absolutely right. Yeah. And this is why there's two big mistakes about the way science works on the cover of Robert's report that he submitted. And I think that's enough to question the contents. And, usually it's considered bad form to judge a book by its cover. But I think in this case, you could probably spend your time better elsewhere. Across Australia on the Community Radio Network, you're listening to Lost in Science.
Have you ever had an interaction with a brush turkey, or as some people call them, bush turkeys, or maybe a scrub turkey? Have you?
What do you mean by define interaction?
I don't know, been
Run screaming.
tete-a-tete.
I've never had a fight with one, if that's what you're talking about.
No, just an interaction where you got in its personal space or it got in your personal space. I mean, I'm thinking specifically, every time I go camping on the East Coast, a brush turkey gets into my bin and takes off with my bin. I mean, that's like...
Why have you got a bin when you're camping?
Because you have to put your scraps somewhere.
I guess.
And then you tie a little bag to... Anyway, Chris, I feel like you have had...
I haven't had an encounter like that with a bin buzzard, as some people might call them.
Well,
or a garbage grouse, or... I'm making up names for...
The ibis is the bin chicken.
Yeah, the bin chicken, yes.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Okay, so imagine if the brush turkey was as big as a kangaroo. Surely we would be all feeling a little bit more apprehensive about shooing it away from our bins.
They would make off with your wheelie bin.
They would make off with your wheelie bin, exactly.
Maybe even a skip.
Yeah.
Just push a skip down the street.
Kangaroo, skip. I see what you did there.
Oh dear. Well, this week, Flinders University have published findings suggesting there were a lot more brush turkeys getting around a couple of million years ago than there are right now. In fact, 5 distinct species of brush turkey, or megapode as they're called, in Australia. And one of these was 4 times the size of the brush turkey that we all know and love today. So megapode is the name of the family of the bird. It just means mega, which is big, and pode, which is foot. So It's just Bigfoot.
Right.
Yeah, it's the Bigfoot of
Sasquatch.
Sasquatch. Bigfoot of the avian world.
The Sasquatch of birds.
Yeah. And these big feet that megapodes have are great for building giant mounds where they lay and incubate their eggs. But I'll get back to that a little bit later.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, so researchers looked at megapode fossils from South Australia and also WA, some that were found in the Nullarbor, actually, the Nullarbor Plains back in 2011, and other ones that were found in the 90s but were never analysed in WA. The fossils date back to about 3 million years for the oldest ones, to around 40,000 years for the most recent fossils. And it's the first time that they've all been analysed together with also the living members of the megapode family in Australia. So they were able to create a whole megapode family tree, an Australian megapode family tree, getting the whole fam back together, as it were. Anyway, and the analysis showed that in Australia we once had these 5 species of brush turkey, all bigger than the ones we have today. And interestingly, the fossils that were found on the Nullarbor Plain. Now, when I think of the Nullarbor Plain, you think of fairly treeless, maybe.
Hence the name.
Hence the plain name. Maybe.
Nullarbor.
Yeah.
No.
Nullarbor means no trees.
Nullarbor. Yeah. Exactly. And maybe a desert. You can edit that out if you want. No, you're going to leave it in.
Keeping that in.
You're keeping that in. But it was quite different. It was quite different about 1 million years ago. It wasn't the Nullarbor 1 million years ago. It was It wasn't an Nullarbor a million years ago. It was actually had quite a lot of woody trees and grasses. And another interesting thing to note here is the big brush turkeys were not flightless like emus or anything. They were big, but they could actually fly.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So
So they're kangaroo-sized birds that could fly.
yeah.
Wow.
Qantas would be happy with that. The flying turkeys, we'll call them from now on.
It would have been a sight to see indeed.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to think that these giant brush turkeys existed, but I also want to talk about their living relatives because they have their own brand of awesomeness. And to be honest, I think they are a little bit underappreciated in Australia, these brush turkeys. For example, like I said, every time I go camping, there's a brush turkey that is just down the road from me, maybe camping at the next camp spot, this brush turkey. It spends the whole 2 weeks that I'm camping there, it is there day and night, just raking all this dead leaf litter together into this giant mound. The only time it stops is to put its nose into the mound, and then it just keeps raking again. So all day, all night, and it just does that the whole time. Anyway, it turns out this obsessive mound building behaviour is actually quite normal for the brush turkey, or at least the male brush turkey. It's the male that builds these large mounds, which are normally 4 meters in diameter. So that's quite big. It's quite big for a mound, and it's about 1 to 1.5 meters tall.
For a small bird. I mean, not a small bird, like a bird the size of
for a bird, that
dog.
might be the size of a small dog, only about maybe a couple of kilos.
Yeah.
It's a pretty substantial mound. Anyway, this mound made by the males is for the female's eggs, and once the female lays the eggs in there, the male goes about keeping the temperature just right, the ambient temperature just right. So all the female does is go in, lay her eggs, and then she's out of there. And in fact, say you've got one mound, it can actually hold different females' eggs.
Oh.
So long as they are the eggs of the male.
So as long as the male is the father,
Yeah.
it will look after all the eggs.
It will look after all the eggs from the different females, and then they'll all hatch. And both mum and dad are gone by the time it hatches.
So it's presumably the decomposing plant matter that keeps the eggs warm. Is that the
That's
deal?
right. Yep. So most bird eggs are incubated by the warmth of a bird's body.
Yep.
But these eggs are incubated by the heat given off by the rotting vegetation. So the rotting vegetation can vary quite a lot. So that's why the male is so fastidious in keeping the temperature constant. You need to keep
and also the reason that they sort of scratch around on it is because that aerates the vegetation matter, so it composts aerobically rather than anaerobically.
Oh, that's a really good point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. Composting birds of Australia. Yeah. Amazing. And it might dig a hole in the mound that might cool it down, and then it might add more leaf litter to the mound, so that might warm it up. And then it has like an amazing thermometer on its nose, so when it's putting its nose into the mound, it's actually checking the temperature of its eggs, which is pretty amazing.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to briefly note here is something a friend of mine said to me the other day, that brush turkeys seem to be doing pretty well for themselves in terms of distribution and abundance. And they're popping up in a lot of areas that people don't really remember seeing them in, like south of Sydney, for example.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now, there isn't a lot of research I could find that sort of showed their distribution patterns or why this was happening or what was going on. And when you think about it, a semi-flightless sort of turkey-like bird that doesn't take care of its young after they hatch, it should be susceptible to all sorts of predators and prey from cats and foxes and stuff like that.
Small dogs, or slightly larger dogs.
Slightly small or slightly larger dogs. But at least, qualitatively, their population seems to be doing quite well, and they seem to be spreading in their distribution. So it should be interesting to see if any research comes out about that or anyone's actually doing some studies. So I'm going to look into that, because I think they are underappreciated. And now we know that there have been 5 species of megapodes that have become extinct. The fact that our current megapodes are doing so well is probably something that we should celebrate.
You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop.
Lost in Science.
Years ago, I don't know if you remember when you were young, peanut allergies weren't really a thing.
No,
so much.
I didn't know anyone with the peanut allergy.
No, peanut butter sandwiches was pretty much what I took to school every day.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Now
Because that was all I could make. But
Well, now at some schools you would get in trouble for that. There
You wouldn't
is,
be allowed.
Yeah, there is
No
like
peanut
calls
zones.
to ban. You have no peanut zones because peanut allergies are very common. They up to 1 in 10 infants and 2 in 10 school-age children having a proven food allergy of some sort.
What?
Yes. And this is why, EpiPens now are part of become part of a first aid kit because
Oh, my goodness.
it's as deadly. Can be potentially
it's
deadly.
so common that you have to have an EpiPen in the first aid kit.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
So peanuts are quite one of the common allergies. The most common food allergies are to proteins found in various foods. So you have things like cow's milk, soy, egg, wheat, peanut, tree nuts, sesame seeds, fish, seafood. But egg and peanut allergies are the most common food allergies in infants and toddlers.
So no egg sandwiches, no peanut butter sandwiches, and no fish paste sandwiches. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not saying that. But
Paste.
some of these allergies people do grow out of. Children often grow out of egg allergies, but not peanuts. They're normally a lifetime affliction.
Right.
And what's been causing the rise isn't really known. There are obviously some theories. A popular one is the hygiene hypothesis, it's called. So that we're too clean now, and that the lack of bacterial threats to our immune systems mean our immune systems get hyper alert to things. Because basically what an allergy is creating antibodies and immune response to something that isn't actually a threat.
I just want to know why peanuts. Like, of all the things, what is it about peanuts?
I can't actually tell you that.
Possibly that, I don't know, maybe it's something to do with them being a legume, because there's a lot of allergies in Europe to things like fava beans is a really common allergy in European men, but not in other people of the world. So it's just the protein. It's a specific protein that people are allergic to.
Yeah. But why it's rising though is people are saying it's because it's something to do with our immune systems. One thing supporting that is that apparently people with pets are less likely to have allergies. So pets are dirty. That's what I hear. There's
My
also
cat cleans herself all the time.
with what though? Her own tongue.
With peanut butter.
I mean, that's not the most hygienic. You try licking yourself with your own tongue, see how clean you get, Claire. Look, there's other things like there is a connection possibly between eczema, which is kind of an allergy itself, but the idea that sensitivity through skin is some way you could get related to it. And another possibly explanation for the rise is because of the previous guidelines around allergies, which basically now we know were misguided. So when the rise in allergies was first observed, the first advice I gave parents was to avoid peanuts. And this wasn't only for infants like babies and toddlers, but also breastfeeding mothers and even while they're pregnant. Now, I've seen various sort of opinions on why this was the case. It seems to me like it might have been a bit of a precautionary approach because when you've got a severe allergy, the only way to peanut allergies, there is no cure for it currently. The only thing to do is to avoid it completely. So, precautionary thing, if this is going to be an allergen, then don't go near it. Might have been, sensible advice, it sounded like. But there had actually been some early trials on avoiding allergens during pregnancy and while breastfeeding. But there's now kind of people looking again at those studies and showing and thinking that, they weren't actually correcting for various factors, like people with a family history of allergies are more likely to adhere to food restrictions, and that can kind of bias the results. So those studies weren't as reliable as they first seemed. So there have since been more robust studies. And one of the most influential was one called the Learning Early About Peanut, or LEAP study, that was published in 2015 in the New England Journal of Medicine. All medical studies these days have to have a dodgy acronym, I'm afraid, Claire. That's the way it works. The best one I saw, I can't remember what it was, but they came up with the acronym TRAGEDY, but spelled TRAGIDY, so they didn't even spell it right. There's a really convoluted way of getting the name, the TRAGEDY study. Anyway, this is the LEAP study, this one we're talking about. Now, this one came back because the investigators had observed that peanut allergies among Jewish children in the United Kingdom was about 10 times as high as that among Israeli children who had a similar ancestry, similar sort of heritage. And they noted that, in the United Kingdom, peanuts were generally avoided in the first year of life, as per the guidelines. But in Israel, they tend to be introduced at around 7 months. There's a very popular snack product called Bamba, apparently, which is a big kind of source of protein. Yeah, peanutty snack product. So they found that basically giving children this particular snack product early greatly introduced the incidence of peanut allergies. And this study fed into a meta-analysis published that was in September 2016, which showed that giving infants peanuts reduced the number with allergies from about, say, 25 per 1,000 to 7 per 1,000.
Wow.
So they gave them peanuts rather than avoiding them, and there was lower incidence.
Yeah.
Right.
Was this at a certain time in their lives, or while their mothers were pregnant, or?
This is actually, well, this was generally these studies were showing giving them in the first sort of 4 to 11 months, I think generally. The actual age best to give is not known. And this is one of the things that's for further study, apparently. But it means that there has been a complete reversal of the advice, because there used to be the advice was avoid the allergies, for the children, also while mothers are pregnant and while they're breastfeeding. Now the guidelines from the Australian Society of Clinical Immunology and Allergy say that don't exclude any of those kind of foods during pregnancy or breastfeeding, and all infants should be given allergenic solid foods, including peanut butter, cooked egg, dairy and wheat products in the first year of life. And this includes infants at high risk of allergy, because this is what has been shown to work. I should point out that same meta-analysis also found that there was a benefit for eggs as well, a similar approach with eggs. The numbers weren't as spectacular. They reduced them from about 54 per 1,000 to 30 per 1,000, but it's still pretty good.
It's still a pretty good reduction.
Yeah, pretty hefty reduction. Yeah. So look, apart from the simple fact that it is good to prevent allergies and save lives, I think we can all agree on that. It's also good news because I think there is enough pressure on parents, especially pregnant mothers, to follow special diets. And the fact that now, they can just encouraged to eat whatever they want is probably a good thing.
It has been the rule lately. It's like, you're pregnant, you have no fun until the baby's born.
And look, to be honest, this is one of the other theories that I've seen about why the rise in allergies is to do with, say, changes in the microbiome and that sort of thing, which is, again, one of the hot topics these days. But saying that food restrictions in pregnancy can lead to, changes in the microbiome, which then could lead to alterations in allergies and that sort of stuff. That's, an area of research that is totally not saying that is necessarily the case, but that is one of the theories people are looking at. But anyway, it is good now that you can eat the peanuts. Of course, not if you are allergic to it. This won't cure you. But at least for the next generation, there is some hope that we can curtail the rise in allergies.
That's all we've got time for on this episode of Lost in Science. Thanks for tuning in and joining us. Lost in Science is recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne and broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the financial assistance of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. If you want to talk to us, talk back to us, you can get in touch. We have a Gmail account, lostinsci@gmail. You can also find us on Twitter and on the Facebook. And if that's not enough Lost in Science for you, you can always tune in again next week, where the team will once again get Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.